Hey guys, welcome to our Phase 5 video tutorial, and for this I'm going to be showing you how to set up an instance of Virtualbox Headless on top of our Ubuntu server. So, in the previous video for Phase 4, we went ahead and used the Virtualbox graphical user interface on top of our Windows 7 hosts. But since we're going to be using our Ubuntu server as our host, in this case we're going to have to do everything strictly through the command line. Now, one case that you might want to do this in is that, let's say you already have your server set up and you have all of the files and settings the way that you want it, but now you want to go ahead and test something out. So rather than risking messing something up, you can go ahead and launch a virtual machine, set up Ubuntu server on top of that, and go ahead and do any testing that you need to do. And this way, if you do mess anything up, you can just tear down that virtual machine and all of your files and settings will still remain intact on your host machine. In another scenario, maybe you need to use Windows Server at the same time as a Linux server, and rather than going out and purchasing a full new piece of hardware or setting up another machine, you can just launch a virtual machine inside of your existing Ubuntu server and then load Windows inside of that. So no matter what the situation is that you need this for, the first thing you need to do is go ahead and get all of the tools that we're going to be using ready. So I just want to point one thing out. And if you happen to be a student, you can go to this website here, dreamspark.com, and if we go over here to students, you can create an account through this link here and just fill out all of the information it requires. And where it says email, if your college or university gave you an email address associated with that particular school, go ahead and use that there, and that should help you get verified, which will give you access to their entire software catalog, and you can start downloading things like Windows Server 2012, 2008. You can use their Microsoft SQL Server and a whole bunch of other software for free, so it's actually pretty cool. Alternately, and what I'm going to be using for this demonstration is another instance of Ubuntu Server, so you can just head over to the Ubuntu website and download the 12.04 LTS 64-bit edition, which is what I'm going to be using in this case. And then a few other tools we're going to use. If you go to Google and just type in, Putty, and the first one that comes up should be this link here. So we'll go ahead to that, and you can just note this URL, or I'll actually post a link in the description for this video anyway. And we want to download from this link right here, the Putty.exe. So go ahead and click that and let it download. And then you can also go back to Google and type in WinSCP. And we want the first link that comes up here. So we'll follow that. And then we want the installation package. So download that. And again, I'll post all of these links inside of the description for this video. And then finally, I'll just point to the virtualbox.org website. And through here, you can go to documentation, to the user manual, and you get all of this information about VirtualBox. This includes the graphical edition, but if we skip down to specifically Chapter 7 here, and we'll click on that, and then scroll maybe a third of the way down the page, and you'll see VBox Headless. And starting from here on, you can read information, and it'll give you pretty much all of the documentation that you would need to get started doing exactly what I'm going to cover in this tutorial here. So let's just go ahead, and the first thing you want to do is go back to your actual physical Ubuntu server and take note of the IP address for it. So the way you can do that is after you log in, type ifconfig and hit enter, and just note this address right here. In my network, it's 192.168.1.7. So write that down or just remember it if you can. And now go back to your Windows machine. Let me just exit out of this. And you want to go to that Putty.exe program. The icon looks like this. So when you launch it, you should see a window similar to this. And you want to put in the hostname or IP address field that IP address. Leave the default port at 22. That's the default SSH port. And then go ahead and click Open. Now you may get a little pop-up the first time that asks you if you want to copy some kind of a security fingerprint. Just go ahead and select yes. So we're going to log in with our normal credentials for the server. And let me clear this just to make it easier. And at that point, now hopefully you can control your server from your Windows machine. And this is actually going to make it a little easier for you to do everything that we're going to be doing in this tutorial. So the other thing that we had downloaded was WinSCP. So if you go to that, we're going to do pretty much the same process. And you click that icon, we're going to go to New. And we'll do 192.168. Again, the same default port 22. And go ahead and log in. Again, you might get a little pop-up asking some kind of a question about a security certificate. Just go ahead and select yes. So what this will do is open up a window that gives you two columns here, and on the left side we have our Windows machine. This is the local computer here, and here is our remote Linux desktop. So we can move up, and here we have the root directory, and the way to get there in command prompt is cd/ and then hit enter. And now if we hit ls and press enter, we're going to list out the directory listing for the root directory, which you can see matches the same names here. We have bin boot dev etc home, bin boot dev etc home. So this is just rendering all of this in a somewhat of a graphical explorer format, which is a little easier for us to use, especially when it comes to dragging and dropping files that we want to copy over. Now before we can actually do that, we need to create a directory for us to work in. So if you go back to our Putty, to the command line, what we want to do is make a new directory. So let's go ahead and type sudo mkdir, and now let's just name it something like, let's say data. So it's going to ask you for your password. And now if we type ls space dash SLA and press enter, you can see here that everything is owned, with the exception of this one. Everything is owned by root and in the group root. But in order for us to actually interact with that folder, we're going to need it owned by our username. So in my case, my username is Brandon, but whatever yours is to the left of this @ symbol is what you're going to want to use. So let's go ahead and just change the ownership for that data directory. And to do that, you want to type sudo chown, that's change ownership. And we don't really need this switch right now, but in case there had been files inside of there, what you could do is -R, capital R, and this is saying recursively. So any files or folders that are going to end up being inside of data would actually be changed as well with this command. We could actually omit it in this case, but let's just go ahead and include it anyway. It doesn't hurt. So we're going to change ownership recursively to Brandon and the group Brandon for the directory data. We press enter, and now let's go ahead and just repeat our list, and you can see again now this is owned by our username. So now if we go back to WinSCP, we don't see that data drive data folder anywhere here, but we can go up to refresh, and we click that. Now it pops up, and we can see now that this is owned by our username. So let's go ahead into there, and now using WinSCP, we'll create a new directory in here. We'll right click, go down to new, and select directory, and we'll just call this software. Select OK. And now once you're inside that folder, what you want to do is on your local machine, find the ISO file that corresponds to the operating system you want to install. So in my situation, I'm going to go ahead to my operating systems, and I want another instance of Ubuntu Server. So I would find here's Ubuntu 12.04 64-bit server, and I could left click this and just drag and drop it over. Now I'm not going to do that because it takes a little bit of time, but I already have this installed in a different directory, and I'll just go ahead and move this And I'll specify that I want to move it to data, software. Okay. So now if I go to my data drive to folder, sorry, and we can see that ISO has now been copied over to it. So now we can go ahead and start actually installing the VirtualBox software. And this is a little bit of a process, especially with the newer version of Ubuntu. So just try and follow along with these commands, and at some point I'll try and link to this file, or I'll clean it up a little bit, but this way you can copy and paste these commands directly. So the first thing that you need to do is actually go ahead and just update your existing operating system file. So we'll do sudo apt-get update and let that run. Now if you haven't done this at all or in a while, it might take a long time, especially this part here. So we want to do sudo apt-get upgrade once that finishes. And it may pop up with a prompt asking yes or no. If it does, just type the letter Y and hit enter. And that'll take a little while. It'll unpack all of the files that it downloads and install them. And then after that's done, the next thing we need to do is point to this URL so that we can actually obtain the software that we want. Now to do that, the first thing I'll show you is if you type out this command cat and then space /etc, and then let's do lsb-release and hit enter. And what this is saying right here is the distribution and all the information about the operating system that you have running currently. In my case, I have Ubuntu 12.04 LTS, and the code name is precise. And if you notice up here, we also have that same code name here. So now what we want to do with that is go ahead and open our text editor. So I'll use Nano. You can use V or Vim, whatever you feel comfortable with. But if you're just going to follow along with this, do sudo nano. We want to open up the file at etc apt sources.list and then press enter. Let me just make this full screen so that you can see it. Now you can page down to the end, and what we want to do is insert that URL, which is deb space http://download.virtualbox.org/virtualbox/debian space precise space contrib. And now hold Control and press X. And down here it'll ask if you want to save these changes. Select Y for yes. And then the file name, we'll just leave it at the default one and hit enter. So now that that's done, we now need to add the key. And in order to do that, we have to type out this long command here. So I'll just type it out. It's wget-q and then http download.virtualbox.org/Debian and then /oracle_vbox.asc space dash capital O dash space the pipe command, which is above the enter key if you hold shift, then space sudo space apt dash key space add space dash, and now hit enter, and you should get a response of OK if everything works out. Then in step 3, you're going to go ahead and re-update your system. So we'll do sudo apt-get update, press enter, and now it's going to use this URL now that we've pointed to it and download any software from there. So once that finishes, and it could take a little while, we need to go ahead and fix some of our header information. So to do that, we want to type out this command here, which is sudo apt-get install linux-headers $$ open uname space -r close parenthesis space build -essential space virtualbox -4.2 space dkms, and now we hit enter. And for me, I already have it installed, so it's not going to do anything, but in your case it's going to take probably a good 10 minutes to install all of this. Once that finally finishes, now we need to go ahead and install this extension pack. So what you want to do is, again, we're going to use the wget, type in this URL, http://download.virtualbox.org/virtualbox/4.2.0. Now Oracle _VM _virtual box _extension _pack -4.2.0 -80737 .vbox -ext pack. Now you go ahead and I'm sorry about that. The first thing you want to do is, let's go all the way back. You don't have to erase that. You can do CD and then use this little tilde symbol, which is to the left of the 1 key, and then a slash, space, and do a double ampersand. And now you can go ahead and hit enter. So now let's go back to our home directory. So we'll do, actually we might be in it. To print your working directory, type pwd, and you can see we're in our home directory. So if we type ls, and we can see we have that extension pack here. So that part has worked out. And now we need to go ahead and just run the install of that. So we're going to go ahead and run this command here, which is sudo vbox manage, then extpack install Oracle VM VirtualBox extension pack -4.2.0 -80737 .vbox-extpack, and we press enter, and in my case it's just going to complain because it's already installed. So just let that install and do everything it needs to do. And then finally what you want to do is add your name to the list of VirtualBox users. So to do that, you type out sudo add user as one word, and then whatever your name is, again to the left of this @ symbol here. In my case it'll be Brandon, and then I want to add that to the list of group VBox users. So I'll hit enter. I'm already a member of that, so again it's going to complain. And let me go ahead and clear that. So now we've gone ahead and we've installed everything we need. So now we can actually start creating our first virtual machine. So to do that, I'm just going to reference a few slides that I had previously. And some of these commands are a little outdated, but they'll still work as a baseline. So the first thing we need to do is create and name our virtual machine guest. And in this case, all of the items in blue are optional or variable commands rather. So the majority of the stuff we're going to do uses this VBox manage, or you can see in this case it's VBox Headless. And if you want further information about those, you can type VBox manage, just that one word alone, and it'll bring up this huge list of possible commands that we can run. And it's actually longer than we can even scroll up. So if you want to handle that, you can go ahead and do VBox manage space pipe space L, the word less. And if we hit enter, it's only going to show one screen at a time. So we can see all of the potential commands that we would run, and just keep hitting the down key to go through all of these. And we have start VM, control VM, storage attachment, modifying and creating hard drives, cloning, handling stuff for the USB, shared folders. So a lot of these things we actually saw in the graphical portion on our Windows machine. We can do this, but again, it has to be done all using these commands. So when you get to the end, or if you want to exit beforehand, just type the letter Q. So the first thing we've got to do is create a virtual machine. So to do that, we're going to type VBox manage create VM -- most if not all of these commands are going to start with 2 dashes. So in some cases this formatting kind of messed that up and blended them together, like you see here is 1, but these are all going to be 2 dashes, no space between them. So we want to type VBox manage create VM, the name switch, and now we want to give it a name. In this case, I'm going to be naming mine guest VM1. And then -- we're going to register it. So we should get this if everything works out right. Guest VM1 is created and registered. And it says exactly where I put it, which is in our home directory in a folder called Virtualbox space VMs /guestvm1 /guestvm1.virtualbox. So let's just take a second and go back to our WinSCP. And if we go back to the root, you can find this home folder and then your username. And then this folder, Virtualbox VMs. And you can see here guest VM1. So if we go inside there, we have that guest VM1.vbox, which pertains to this line right here. So the next thing we want to do is start configuring certain parameters about it. So we're going to attach some memory and configure the boot up device and the network card for it. So to do that, again, we're going to do VBox manage, modify our virtual machine using the modify VM command. We want to tell it which guest we want to modify, because we might have more than one. And now we're going to give it a amount of memory using the memory command. In this case, even though I put 2048 here, I'm just going to give it 1 gig. So we'll do 1024 in this case. This is in megabytes, so 2048 megabytes is 2 gigabytes, 1024 megabytes is 1 gigabyte. Now 2 dashes ACPI on. Boot 1 is going to be our DVD, and then ~NIC1, our network interface card number 1 is going to use network address translation. So go ahead and press enter on that, and we should get back to the command prompt if everything went well. And now just to show you what this is starting to look like, we'll do the VBox manage show VM info, and I'm going to leave out the rest for right now just so you can see. It'll tell us how we're supposed to use this. So it wants a UUID or a name, and then we can alternately add details to the end if we want. This UUID number pertains right here when we created and registered our guest VM1 is given a unique ID that looks like this. But obviously you don't want to sit there and type out this command, so we'll just use our human readable name, which is guest VM1. So press up on your keyboard to get back, and we'll just finish out this command with our guest VM1 and then space. Let's bring up the detailed view. So we'll scroll up and we can see here the name is guest VM1 and we haven't specified an operating system yet. Our hardware ID, we can see how much memory is there, the virtual RAM, the CPU, capacity, and all these various things that we can always override and change later on if we want. So the next thing we need to do is specify what kind of an operating system we want to install onto it and begin actually attaching a hard drive so that we can install our guest OS. So we're going to pick up right here and we want to do create a VDI file. So vbox manage create VDI. We'll do 2 dashes, and actually you can leave that where it is. Let's go back to WinSCP and let's just go back until we're inside of our home directory. And inside your home, let's go ahead and right click, go to new, create a new directory, and we'll call this virtual_drives. Okay? And now minimize that. So what we're going to do here is follow along with this right here. So we're going to give this a file name, and we want to specify our home directory, your username. Again, make sure you put in your username and don't copy this exactly for mine. And now that folder that we just created, which was virtual_drives, and now just name this, but it's a little bit easier if we name it the same name for our hard drive as our guest that it's attached to. So I'll just name it guest VM1, and it's a little easier to associate which hard drive goes with which virtual machine. So guest VM1 .vdi, and now space 2 dashes, and we want to specify a size. In this case, I'm going to make mine 40 gigabytes. So this is a measurement in megabytes. We want 40,000 megabytes, which is 40 gigabytes. So now we hit enter, and it's going to create that hard disk drive image for us. And then we need to go ahead and start to attach these things. So the first thing we're going to do is actually skip this step here. We want to specify the operating system type. So vbox manage once again. And we want to work on our guest VM1. And now 2 dashes OS type. And before I do that, actually, let's just go back. We'll do vbox manage list OS type. Is it type or types? Types. And you can get a list of all of the supported operating system types. And again, we would need to use the less command if we wanted to see the top of this list. But already you can see here that we get Ubuntu_64 is the ID for the particular operating system that I'm going to be using. So let's just press up, and we want to do vbox manage, modify our virtual machine, guest VM1 -- OS type, and then space capital U Ubuntu _64 for 64-bit, and press enter. So next we need to make a controller which is going to handle the attachment of our various peripheral devices. These would be things like our DVD drive, our hard drive or hard drives, and things like that. So that's going to fall under the VBox manage storage control function. Storage CTL guest VM1. And now name, we have to name it. I'm going to name mine like this, and then space dash add SATA. So now we're going to go ahead and start to attach things, and to do that we're going to use the storage attach function. So we have storage attach VM1, and now dash storage CTL, the name that we specified in one step above, which is storage controller, or SATA controller rather, and then 2 dashes port 0, 2 dashes device 0, 2 dashes type is going to be a DVD drive. Actually, you know what? No, make the first one the HDD for hard disk drive. Then 2 dashes, and the medium, we're going to attach that VDI file that we created previously, which should be in our home, Brandon, and we actually went and put it in. Let me just double check on this. The virtual drives. Virtual drives. And then we named it the same as our guest, so guest VM1.vdi. Okay, now to shorten things, just press up and you can erase everything back to port 0. You want to replace the 0 with 1, and then space dash dash device 0. The type is going to be DVD drive as one word, space dash dash medium, and in this case we want to attach the ISO file that we had uploaded previously. So again, we can double check that. We'd put that in our data drive, software, there it is. So you want to do /data/soft, and if you're forget which ones or you get a little lazy, you can just type the first few letters and hit tab, and it should fill out that line for you. Since this is the only ISO in that folder, if we hit tab again, it's going to fill out that entire line for us. So let's just go ahead, and we have all the way to the ISO, which is good. So now go ahead and hit enter. So now we've attached our hard drive and our DVD drive to this SATA controller, and in particular we have our file for our hard drive attached as our hard disk drive, and we have this ISO file, which is the installer for Ubuntu Server, attached as the DVD drive. So now we're done, and we can actually just go ahead and start up our virtual machine. But before we do that, so that we don't run into a problem, I want to show you something else, which is the use of a little built-in program called Screen. And what we're going to do is just type the word screen and hit enter, and you can just hit enter again to ignore that. And now we want to go ahead and run this command here. So we're going to do VBox Headless space dash dash start VM, and the name of the virtual machine we want to start is guest VM1, and then a space and an ampersand. And when we hit enter, it should say VRDE server is listening on port 3389. This is virtual remote desktop emulator. So we're going to go ahead and just get out of this here, but we don't want to exit. If we just exit this, it's going to close all of this down and give us problems. So the way that we can use screen to exit back to our command prompt while keeping this actually live is hold Control Shift and hit the letter A all at the same time, and now press the letter D. And now we're back here. Now to get back to that, we can just do screen space -R for resume and hit enter, and now we're back at this screen. So once again, that is Control Shift A, let go, and now hit the letter D. And I didn't do it quickly enough, so Control Shift A, then the letter D. So now to get access to what we just did, if on your Windows computer you go down to the Start menu, and in this box here we're going to type in MSTSC for Microsoft Terminal Services Client, and hit enter. And now we want to put in that same IP address that we were using before, so 192.168.1.7. Go ahead and connect, and it should give you a screen that looks like this. And here you have the installer all ready to go for installing our Ubuntu server into our virtual machine. And this is actually full circle back to our first video when we just did a standalone installation of Ubuntu server. So you can go ahead and just reflect back on that if you have any questions or forgot some of the settings with this. We would just walk through it like so, and continue on with that installation. Now what we could do is, once that is actually done, it's going to take a little while, we could allow SSH install and have a separate SSH server. And since this virtual machine can actually take its own separate IP address, we would be able to access either one or the other or both of these servers through our Putty client. And we could just go ahead and right-click Putty, run SSH, and specify a separate IP address, or if we wanted to change the port number, we could do that as well. And there's really no limit to how many of these you can run, as long as you have enough RAM inside of your computer to support all of the concurrent virtual machines that are going to run at the same time. So now you have that, and you can begin doing any testing or whatever else you want with it. And I guess in a separate tutorial, I'm going to follow up with different ways that we can begin using Ubuntu. And one of the things I'm going to cover is the ability to use virtual hosts to allow multiple different websites to be passed between one server or another. So you can actually host one website on one server and one website on the virtual server, and all of the traffic will actually just go to the host, and it'll be reflected from there accordingly to whichever domain it's intended for. So I'll post links to that later on, but hopefully this all worked out for you and you can begin testing. So thanks for watching, and check out the next tutorial.